what first made you want to make a feature film, and what were the kind of the challenges and the main sort of differences involved with making that transition from the type of work that you do in your installations to the more sort of linear narrative kind of feature film?
I think it's that notion of storytelling. I think that, of course, artists through their still images in photography or painting or video or sculpture, they're always telling some kind of a story. But I just love cinematic story in the way that I think a lot of people love to hear stories, to be told stories. And I wondered if I could challenge myself as a visual artist who doesn't really have all the tools for making film, to take this risk of sort of come closer to the language of cinema. And that means the question of character, the question of understanding that the number one point in relating to cinema is the understanding of the character, and for the audience to be able to discover the complexity of the character and to feel intimate with that. And that meant, for the first time, I had to leave behind the way I was functioning, which was the figures in my work, women or men, were basically devoid of identity. They were more like iconic figures who sort of became an emblem of whatever was going on in the ideological aspect of the country or the society. It was a critique of the society, and they were there as the agents to be used to speak about those complex stories. But I never really tried to get inside the mind and heart of the character. It was more like on the outside.
Sure.
And this was really a new experience for me, and I wanted to know if I could do that. I mean, I think the other challenge for me was, could I keep people's attention for more than 10 minutes and make a story, and really, truly, for 90 minutes? And then I learned how difficult that transition was. That really, I think the languages, as similar as they are so different.
Yes.
And the relationship of the audience to, let's say, a video art installation in a gallery and museum versus when they're seated in a theater, their attention span, their expectations are completely different. And so the artist cannot be so arrogant to say, well, anything goes and I just do what I want. Then it just doesn't work like that. So you have to first sort of understand, study the language of cinema, and then reject it if you want to, but you cannot reject it before.
But absorb it.
And absorb it.
And then make that decision.
And then, infuse your own properties, which you bring as a tool, which is our strength, obviously, is power of image and not the word, and to be able to communicate with the audience a whole new visual way that a more conventional, although of course film is a visual form, but I mean it truly rely on the power of the image, where image after image is more like tableau after tableau, and yet be able to weave in there a narrative that is concise, is meaningful, and is moving, It's a challenge, and I'm not sure if I succeeded. It was just an attempt in, really make this experiment.
Well, I felt really personally engaged with all of the characters.
Well, I'm so glad.
And I was involved with all of them, equally. So.
Well, I mean, a very important thing to add too is that I think it's been the case in all my past work, and it is with this case, that although in the surface it really is about Iran and Iranian women and the subject that is really very historical about the country, it really is meant to transcend that, again, by its way of using the image and like the way that we came into the orchard, where that other people, other women, other, people from countries that are also dealing with similar issues, such as looking for freedom and democracy or living in an oppressive environment, that somehow they identify with the woman and the country, that it's not like just feeling sorry for the country or for those women, but feeling like I share some of that dilemma.
Yes.
Whether it's a Western woman or an Eastern woman, that these are really human conditions that we are exposed to in different degrees according to where our background is. And I mean, I can think of Zarine and her anorexia, for example. That is one international problem. Or, I mean, anyway, I can go on and on about how each character in me is not just an Iranian character, but
or a character indeed from the 50s.
Exactly.
It transcends time as well.
Exactly. This was really my hope.
Bird's Eye View are an organisation that obviously celebrate women filmmakers, and we cite a statistic that only 7% of all filmmakers are women. And just when we're talking about making the transition from your visual art, which is obviously very widely acclaimed, to the action of making a feature film, do you think that being a woman have had any kind of effect in that in any way? Or?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, I think that for sure my perspective, points of view about about looking at, for example, the political event that took place in Iran, or the philosophical question that the four women are dealing with, which is looking for transformation, looking for freedom, looking for independence, which could have been a man. I mean, a man could also be in a kind of crisis and looking. But I think the poetry that I placed here in terms of sort of making this conceptual arc between the woman and the country looking for freedom and democracy equally. Maybe that's a feminine approach to it, where it's got this kind of an emotion. But I mean, I obviously feel completely connected to the plight of women from Iran, for example, because I so relate to this idea of growing up in a repressive environment, but being completely strong, and the courage that takes for any woman who's under any pressure to take their lives into their own hands. And like you saw this summer, the Iranian women on the street, and you saw in my film how women were always in the forefront. In fact, the main character that takes us into the political activity is a woman. So, I mean, obviously, I give more space to the women, but not only about women issues, but really about covering existential questions that any person would have. Why am I born? What is my destiny? What am I to do? How can I run away from this society and all these issues? And the second thing is the question of injustice. And the fact that a woman could raise that question. And woman, not because she's a woman or it's about the woman issue, but because of the country, it's about the nationality. Why not? And oddly enough, this summer we had Neda as the female martyr of Iran, who became the symbol of the movement for democracy in Iran. And in my film, again, is a woman that sort of kind of a Jeanne d'Arc, where she has no ideology to follow, but she just wants social justice. So I think the only way I can put it together is that I put the woman in the forefront to ask all the important questions, as much as a man could. But it's not only reduced to women's issues. This is what I mean. It's about raising questions that are basic human existential questions, and about political questions. So I guess I'm just repositioning this, that why do we always have to see everything through a man's eye? Let's see it through a woman's eye. But not only because it's a woman's issue.
I was just wanted to ask how the title relates to the film.
We really struggled with the title. I mean, the truth is that if you talk to the author, she said she wrote this book in reaction to Men Without Women. I haven't read that book, but apparently it's not one of his most famous books. But the point is that, again, and we talked about with the producers, because he kept saying we should change it because it sounds like a feminist film and it undermines the political thing. It's really not about that. It's really about let the woman go on their journey without men. I mean, this is, again, you'll find out through this film that there's some negative male characters and there's some positive characters. The same that there are some negative female characters. Fakhri is the most narcissistic, vain character. Then you have Zareen, who's the most sacred and saintly. So just as there are bad men, there are bad women. But it's just not centered around men.
You've said that you have a close relationship with Shirin Neshat, and I wondered when that was kind of born and how your relationship with her affected the creative process of making the film.
Well, you see, I've always, my idols in life have been, for the past, my adult life, have been Iranian women. I don't know why, because especially Iranian women writers. I've just been fascinated by how you know, their fantastic imagination, and the lives they live that was really, really difficult. And I have several other ladies that I've used their literature in my work. That one way or the other they were not victims, but they had really, really tough time. And yet they're great artists, and how their lives and their work informs each other, you know, in a way that is inseparable.
Yes.
And I could say a little bit that about me, where not that I've lived a hard life, not at all comparing to them, but my personal life and my personality is inseparable from the work I make.
Yes.
I cannot separate. And I think ultimately my work is my conversation with the world, you know. And with Sharnush, I just felt when I met her, which she was living as opposed to many other ladies who were already dead, I wasn't sure about her personality. I loved her work, but when I met her, there is a strangeness about her, there is a madness about her, which explains everything about why she writes the kind of books that she does. That in a way, through her madness and through her magic realism, through her novels, she transcends, through her art, her creativity, she transcends all pains. She was in prison for a number of times, once for 5 years. She's ill with mental illness, she's completely poor. But her fantastic art has been her way of survival. And it projects itself on the book, on the work. And I just think that's the most honest way to be with your audience, you know, where it's really impossible to dissect the artist from the work, you know. As much as the artist tries to be private, and you really do try, but like every one of the characters is a projection of me. Every one of her characters are embodiment of Sharnush Parsipour. So I just, when I met her, it just sort of like summarized everything that I idealized about an artist, you know, and the life that she endured. And I just found this terrible conviction that I must make this film, and I must make her proud, because she deserves it. She's never been given this acknowledgement. And it's been a love affair. It's really been truly a love affair. Like, she's not old enough to be my mother, but she's older than me, and I just sort of embraced her. And I think we have both sort of adopted each other as friends, as supporters, as artists, you know. And I really love her for that, and I think she's inspired me really a great deal, and the importance of being an artist.
The film is full of contrasts, so the inside and the outside, and the personal and the political, and also visually the light and the dark. And I just wondered, do you think men and women, the female and male characters within the film, are set at all as kind of polar opposites?
It's a very interesting question, because I think the whole film is about kind of paradox, you know. Like,
yes.
And it's the same with all my past work.
Yes.
Like men, women, culture, nature, West, East. In this film, it was really carefully calculated, this idea of paradox. The city, the orchard, the political, the philosophical, the individual, the community, woman, men, beauty, violence. You know, where you have, you know, Zarin scene in the Hammam, it's so beautiful, and then she's like, so this question of paradox, it's always been a kind of integral aspect of my thinking in terms of any work of art, which I just don't find anything absolute. I always see them in form of duality, a dichotomy. I don't know why, maybe because I'm myself a hybrid being, that I'm divided between two worlds, or I don't know, I just, the way I see everything, that is never, it's like yin and yang, you know. And so, you're very good in noticing that. I mean, we really carry this out to the max in the film, in terms of the contrast, you know, really emphasizing the political thing, the struggle versus the individual struggle in the garden outside, and then they emerge, and suddenly the people have to put together this contrast where the yin and yang are coming together. So I would say that this is more like a subconscious, as opposed to a rational decision that I have, that it sort of automatically goes with everything I make. And I don't know why. I don't have really an explanation for that.
I just wanted to kind of wrap up by asking what's next for you.
I'm asking the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I you know, it's just, I always feel like when you're making film, you work and work and work, until you arrive at a place that has been waiting for you to arrive, and you say, okay, I've arrived. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's just, and looking for a project is like, something is waiting for you there, and you just have to work your way up until you just get there and say, this is it. Now, it could be from the West, it could be from Africa, it could be from the East, but it's just something out there. I mean, generally, I obviously am not afraid of taking leaps.
Clearly.
I know I want to make films, and I think being a visual artist, I don't have to worry about making that film artistic. So why not be closer to cinema? I love the idea that I can get closer to grassroots, to the general public, where my own mother could go see the film and understand it. I mean, really, this is something that I feel that there's a more democracy in that, as opposed to, you know, having an education to go to a museum to understand the show, which I also appreciate. But I just think that there's cinema is something, I want to be closer to the people.